Hello, hello, my brothers and sisters. This is Garrett Bake, your brother in arms, and welcome to another episode of The Tactical Businessman. Today's topic, learning for two. I don't know about you guys, but I wasn't really a huge fan of learning. I wasn't. Why? Because it was so boring. You would sit in a classroom, you would have a teacher talk to you about a concept, be it math or science or arithmetic, one of these things, and then you would go home and you would have homework to do. And you'd come back the next day and the process would repeat itself over and over and over again. Now, if you were like me, you struggled. I'm not going to say that school was extremely difficult for me, but learning itself was very difficult for me. I didn't have the patience for it. Sometimes concepts or ideas didn't connect or didn't make sense. So it was difficult for me. And this pattern, though, it's like kept repeating itself, right? Went to college. Freshman year of college, I failed 2 classes. That's right, failed 2 classes. Again, not because I was dumb, but because I literally struggled with learning. And this pattern continued. It didn't matter if it was sports or if it was police work or whatever it was. I struggled with this idea of learning. And there were periods of time, though, that I became really good at a particular subject. And I started to look back and say, okay, why is it that I'm having success in this particular subject when I've struggled with it for so long? I'll take shooting a gun, for example. A lot of you like to shoot guns. And if you don't, I'm sorry, you should try it sometime. Seriously, it's really fun. So when I first learned to shoot a gun the right way was in the police academy. I had no idea how to shoot a gun, and I've talked about this before. But shooting a gun was something that was new to me. And so they would teach me side alignment trigger control. They would teach me to point at the target, and they would teach me how to stand, and they would teach me how to holster and unholster my weapon, and they would teach me all of these things. And sometimes I would get it and sometimes I wouldn't, especially under pressure. And I went through this period probably for about 3 years, 3.5, maybe 4 years. And then I got on the SWAT team. Well, part of the SWAT team was, again, learning all of these things. But the SWAT team brought in this unique angle. And the unique angle was sometimes I was the student and sometimes I was the teacher. And the crazy part was, I wasn't even the best teacher. They would just say, hey, you're in charge of setting up the course, the handgun course for next training. Or you're in charge of setting up the scenarios for the next training. Or you're in charge of X, Y, Z. So we were always rotating who it was that was teaching. And this crazy thing happened. As we were rotating around who it was that was teaching and what it was they were teaching, it seemed like everybody got better. I didn't understand it, right? And it didn't mean anything to me at the time. But I started to apply that same concept in these other areas that I went to. When I went to narcotics afterwards, when I worked undercover, when I was a supervisor. What I would do is I would initially teach a concept, but then I would have whoever it was that I was teaching, after 1 or 2 or 3 tries, I would have them then take that concept and start to teach it to these other people. And this crazy thing happened. They got better at it. Shocking, right? I didn't understand this pattern, didn't understand what it was, but then I started to see these results, right? So subconsciously, I started to determine this pattern for learning. And I read this recently, and it says, when one teaches, 2 learn. When one teaches, 2 learn. Well, what does that mean? The interesting part is when you're learning a concept, your mind is in a certain way, right? It's receiving information. When it's teaching, it's taking the information that's already in there, processing it, digesting it, organizing it, and then regurgitating it. So what do you think happens when you're teaching a concept? In essence, you're learning. You're learning because you're internalizing. You're internalizing this idea. You're internalizing this concept. Now, when I first started my business, I had no idea how to do this exact same thing that I'm doing right now, podcasting. Somebody's like, hey, have you ever thought about doing a podcast? I was like, no. They said, you like to talk a lot. You should probably do a podcast. I was like, okay, well then I guess I'll do a podcast. So I remember when I first started this podcast, I reached out to a guy who charged me $6,000. Yes, I will openly admit that. I got hosed for $6,000 to learn how to do this exact same thing I'm doing right now, which is turn on a video camera, turn on a microphone, turn on the editing software, and hit record. Yes, but again, I didn't know. So he puts me through this Zoom lesson. This is the equipment that you need. This is how you need to set it up, and this is what you do. And I remember struggling and watching his video over and over and over again, trying to put these pieces together, trying to make it work, trying to do this, trying to do that, and I got really frustrated. I got really pissed off. And what ended up happening? Well, eventually he had to walk me through the steps of doing it to make sure that it got done right. And so I started my podcast. Not sure if I was doing it the right way. In fact, sometimes I didn't. Sometimes I thought I was recording and I didn't. Sometimes the sound worked and sometimes the sound didn't. And this back and forth thing. Well, a few months in, there were some friends of mine who were also interested in starting a podcast. And they came from, different walks of life. One a chiropractor, one a contractor, one a life insurance agent, different walks of life. And they're like, hey man, we see that you're doing a podcast. How do you do your podcast? And I was like, I have no idea. I push this button and I push that button and it records. They're like, no, seriously, how did you do it? How did you put it all together? And when they started asking me these questions, it forced me to do what? It forced me to go back to where it was when I first started. I didn't know what I was doing. So what did I do? And so I told them that. I said the first thing I needed to make sure was I had the right equipment. So then they asked me, well, what's the right equipment? Oh, well, these microphones are called Shure mics. They're really expensive, but they work really good. You're going to get one of those. Then you want to get this Rode arm that will help extend the mic and move it around to where you want it to go. Then you're going to want to get some headphones, right, to make sure you can hear yourself, the sound quality is working. Then you're going to need to, and I just started going down this list of all the things that I had, looking at my desk, and I understood that, okay, why do I have this piece? Well, this piece is for this. Well, why do I have that piece? Well, that piece is for that. And I literally went step by step by step by step on all the equipment that they needed. And after I got done explaining it, I was like, oh, I understand how this process works now. And then they were like, oh, I understand what all these pieces are. Again, when one teaches, to learn. So I started to see this happening, and then they would ask me, okay, well, how do you record? Oh, well, I use this software. Well, how does it work? Oh, well, let me see. And so I would go through step by step by step, and this is how it works, and this is where it goes, and this is what you need to do with it, and literally just laying it all out. To where now, would I consider myself an absolute expert when it comes to podcasting? No. But do I know my way around the kitchen? Yes, absolutely I do. And that makes me what? It makes me better at what it is that I do. I understand it now. Why? Because I lived it and then I taught it. I lived it, then I taught it. So ask yourself right now, in your business, where is it that you're still stuck in the I do everything phase, i.e., I learned it, therefore I have to do it. And then you get pissed off and frustrated. Why? Because you end up doing everything. When you haven't taken the time to, one, internalize what it is that you know, and then two, teach it, regurgitate it, organize it in your mind, put it in a structure that makes sense, and then teach it to those around you. Because in the end, who's going to be learning? Well, there's two of you. You're going to be learning and the person that you're teaching. Which ultimately leads to what? It leads to more knowledge, to more space, to more expansion, to more growth. Do you want to empower your team? You want to empower the people that work for you? Start to teach them. Don't keep them in the dark, because that ends up hurting two people, you and them. Or is it with your family? Think about this, with your kids. Did you show your kids how to ride a bike? Well, how did you do that? Well, you talked about what it was that you knew about riding a bike, and then you showed them how to do it, and then they did it. But see, at some point you stopped. How do I know? Because I did the same thing. You stopped teaching them what? Not the basics things like how to ride a bike and how to cook some eggs or how to make their bed, right? These little basic things. Yeah, sure, you can teach them that. But what about teaching them how to be a man? How to be a woman? How to treat a woman? How to treat a stranger? How to go after what it is that you want in life? See, you see some of these topics that they exist out there. You know they exist out there. Why? Because at some point you were taught it. But how is it that you're teaching your children these things? Or have you even taught your children these things? Same thing when it comes to your body. Crazy right now, I've been a runner for many years. And my children were always what? They were always on the side cheering me on. I ran marathons for many years. I'm getting back into it right now. But I ran marathons for many years. And my children were always there at my races, cheering me on, holding up signs. We love you, Daddy. You're doing awesome. All these cool things. They would run with me the last 100 yards to the finish line. Like all of these things, but they never participated in it. And now all of a sudden I've got 2 of my 3 kids who are participating in it. And what do they want to know? Hey, Daddy, how do you use this foam roller? How do you stretch? Hey, I've got this pain in my shin. Like, what do I do? Hey, how do you work on stride? Hey, how do I work on getting faster? Hey, how does breathing work? Hey, how does this? And all of a sudden they're asking me all these questions, and it's forcing me to do what? To take all the information that I know on the inside and regurgitate it, organize it, make it simpler so that I can then teach it to them. Because what I'm doing is I'm empowering them. So you learn it first, and then you teach it. How do you make better employees? Well, you learn something, then you teach it. How do you make a better family? Well, you learn something, then you teach it. Like the concepts are very simple. But we choose to, and myself included, we choose to make life much more complicated than it needs to be. So I want you to consider where it is in your life right now that you've learned something, but you have yet to teach it. You have yet to transfer that knowledge on to a coworker, to an employee, to your wife, to your children. And you somehow expect your life to get better. Well, it's not going to. And I want you to consider again that this knowledge, whatever it is that you got it from, is not yours to begin with. It's yours to give away. And how do we do that? Well, we teach it. And there are 2 that benefit from it. You, because you understand how the process works better. You understand how the system works better. You understand the concept or the idea or the theory or the problem better. And 2, because they now understand what you understand. So you both end up benefiting from it. So I challenge you to apply this in your life. Find an area, be it with your body, be it in your relationship, be it with your children, be it in your business, wherever it is. Take this concept and start to apply it. A lot of you get frustrated with your wife and your kids because they're not on the same level as you. Well, that's right, Einstein, because you haven't taught them anything. So take the time to teach them. Take the time to show them. And watch what happens to your life. All right, that is it for today. As always, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. You want more information? Go to GarrettBake.com. You want even more information? I'm going to tell you where to go. Go to thetacticalbusinessman.com. That's right. It's going live. What? Yeah. I got some cool stuff. I'll explain in more detail in the next episode. But for now, just know there's something there waiting for you. All right. As always, stay safe. I will see you on the next one.